Tiger King is one of those rare, special shows that only comes around once in a blue moon. A show so crazy and unbelievably strange that it's able to unite the world in even the most trying times.
I've been doing this 20 years, never even been bit.
And the crime-filled docu-series that still has the world questioning what was in their coffee this morning certainly isn't without its good guys and bad guys.
She wanted to shut down his zoo.
For in the wild, unchained land of Oklahoma, murder, mayhem, and madness run amok. It should be noted that this ranking will carry more weight than most, as in this case, real people are being ranked.
Be sure you don't call me.
While we'd usually be hesitant to call anybody in real life evil, the show isn't lacking in morally distressing people, so we're gonna go ahead anyway. I'm Brad with Wicked Binge. Get ready to pounce headfirst into Tiger King, good to evil.
I got a big mouth and television station.
Now then, before we start, let's just get this out there. We've based much of this on audience speculation and the general consensus of internet opinions. We want to make it totally clear. I don't think anybody truly knows exactly what happened in this disaster of a situation. So, you know that whole people featured are innocent until proven guilty in the court of law thing that gets read on cops? Yeah, that applies here. This is all opinion. As usual, we'll start with the kindest, purest characters and work our way down from there. Our best and brightest goes to Kelsey Safsafari, a zookeeper at the GW Zoo. Throughout the series, Saf is able to maintain a cool, collected prose, even as the world collapses around him at the GW Zoo. When he gets his arm torn off by a tiger, he brushes it off as a risk that he knew was there and was willing to take.
I am never going to financially recover from this.
He didn't seek legal action against Joe Exotic, and even went back to work only a few days after the accident to prevent the media from vilifying the zoo. Upon reflecting on the last episode, he comments that not a single animal benefited from the war.
Not a single animal benefited from this war.
What a heart of gold. Below Saf, but very close, we have John Rank, the second amputee on our list. It seems the less limbs you have in this show, the more reasonable you become. He didn't lose his legs to tigers, however. He actually had a ziplining accident in 1994, which still sounds like a gnarly injury nonetheless.
I fell 50 feet and landed on my feet.
John has a very similar thought process to Sav. He was only there to care for his animals, and cared for his animals he did, until Jeff Lowe came along and took ownership of the GW park.
I miss the babies a lot. I really, really do. I miss Bone Digger and Cletus.
Like Sav, he quit the zoo, and now no longer works with big cats. He's only lower on the list than Sav, simply because he didn't literally sacrifice life and limb to the tiger's voracious appetites. Next up on our list, we have Joshua Dial, former Walmart manager turned political campaign manager. Joshua never ceases to be a voice of reason and gives a feeling of normalcy.
It was the worst experience of my life.
He does very little evil, if any, unless being honest is immoral. He was present for Travis's death, one of Joe's husbands, and assisted in getting help even though he knew it would be in vain.
I knew he was dead the second he pulled the trigger, but
Dial turned out to be an honest guy who brought an air of comfort and consistency to the documentary, even though he didn't help anyone all that much. And for that, he secures the Bronze Medal of Goodness in this good to evil ranking. Coming up next is Barbara Bala Fisher. She's probably the most fleeting character in the series, with a very small amount of screen time, but she is important in getting a full image of the person that her former employer, Doc Antle, really is.
He felt like he could get them to do anything.
She took care of tigers for Doc and didn't hurt anybody in the process. In addition, she managed to resist his advances and leave his cult to tell her story. While she didn't do objectively positive actions other than her job, her innocence in the series and quirky personality lets her keep a positive status on this list.
Like, I would go to make a sandwich. My bread would be full of cockroaches and it was like nothing.
Before we start, let's give an honorable mention to Joe Exotic's parents. They're sued by Carol Baskin for having some of his assets in his name, and they're most likely victims of circumstance. They do seem like generally good people who support their son through his endeavors, which is all that can be asked of them.
That's every phone call. Mom, I need some money for this.
Like 300 and something.
Alright, with that, we now enter the moral gray area. Quicker than usual, I'd say. Starting off, we got Rick Kirkman, the former Inside Edition team member turned reality TV producer.
It was a crazy beginning.
He straddles the line between neutral and good due to his pessimistic outlook on life and his questionable motives for recording the reality TV show. We consider him to be a good person, since he has expressed an overwhelming regret for being part of Exotic Zoo and his position on why he was there in the first place.
I got everything invested in that project that no longer exists.
He wanted to record a reality TV show, and he wanted to make money, which is hard to fault him for. Once all of his footage was destroyed when an arsonist, who was probably Joe himself, burned down his recording studio, he packed his bags and left, which was most likely the best thing he could have done.
I left everything I owned, and I drove, and I left and went back to Dallas.
Now, moving on, we're going to throw in Eric Cowie, former head zookeeper at GW Zoo.
And now, look at me. I'm doing tiger shows.
He comes off as an apathetic character at times for sure.
They get so big so fast.
He may not care about many of his co-workers, but insists that he's only there for the animals. It's also sad that he seems to feel some sense of guilt for not stopping the tigers from being killed, even if he claims there wasn't anything he could do.
There's no way for me to stop it.
Alas, poor Travis. We hardly knew ya. The youngest of Joe's husbands, Travis Maldonado, married Exotic at age 19.
I am tall, tan, and beautiful.
He seemed to only treat his marriage to Joe as a chore, and he reportedly told his sister that it was only a gig for him. This wouldn't be surprising, since Exotic showered him with gifts all the time. He also doesn't get any good boy points for aiming guns at people's faces and waiting for them to wake up either.
Sometimes he'd wake you up pointing a gun at you.
We won't say he was bad, however. Teenagers can be pretty reckless, which makes his tragic end a notably sad part of the documentary. On to Joe's other ex-husband, John Finlay, arguably one of the most popular characters in the series. He's a reasonable guy overall. He cares for his tigers and he cares for his crocodiles, and that's about it. He admits that he's not really gay and has an affair with Joe's secretary.
All through school, I was dating a girl.
In the last episode, we see him get his Joe Exotic tattoo covered up for good.
I won't even be a memory.
Even though he's in the gray, his immoral activities weren't a mere slap on the wrist compared to other people on this list. Pouncing forward, it's time for everyone's favorite executive assistant, Anne McQueen. Between accusing people of murder and storing money for Don Lewis, she actually does very little on the show.
Carol knows more than what she's telling me.
She does seem to care about Don's wellness and passionately believes that there was foul play in his disappearance.
See a headstone. I would like closure.
Her aiding in him selling endangered animals can't be overlooked though, which we can consider to be generally unethical behavior. Next in line for moral limbo is Dylan Passage, Joe's current fling.
When he proposed, I said yes.
Even with Joe's incarceration, Dylan stands by his husband and continues to endorse a potential presidential pardon for Joe.
I just want you to worry about getting out of there. Keep your head on your shoulders.
Which probably doesn't shine a positive light on him. We also catch a glimpse of him hiding sale receipts from the cameras that document the exchange of tigers to Doc Antle, which is pretty bad. But since he seems to be the only person on the show that legitimately likes Joe Exotic for who he is, we'll give him a pass on a bad ranking, for the sake of love.
I would definitely just hug him as tight as I could.
It's time for our knight in shining armor to ride in valiantly on his jet ski and save us all, the one and only James Garretson. Confidential informant for the FBI plus full-time badass, James owned his own collection of cats before moving all his inventory to the GW Zoo and working for Joe.
Not great friends with him, but friendly.
When he was faced with the decision to save himself or sell out Exotic, he didn't hesitate to turn on Joe. He also admits to owning a lemur illegally, and he may or may not own a stolen car, if you believe Jeff Lowe.
If I stole a Hummer, don't you think I'd be charged?
This is the first person on the list that we know committed a crime, so he was bound to be further down. But he kind of redeems himself after testifying against Joe in court, so he's not so bad if we consider betraying Joe Exotic an act of good, which I do.
And I thought it was a noble thing to do.
With our gray section complete, it's time to lower ourselves down a peg and get to the more villainous characters in this documentary. Oh yeah, it's time to get evil. We're not really sure what went on with Alan Glover. He was the first would-be assassin of Carol Baskin, except once Joe paid him $3 grand, he disappeared.
Apparently I chickened the out and didn't make it there.
The narrative makes it unclear whether he drove down to Florida and changed his mind, or whether he went straight home to South Carolina. Either way, agreeing to murder someone doesn't put you in the best light, whether you're planning on doing it or not. For that, he's our first Tiger King evildoer. Closely piggybacking is Carol Baskin's current husband, Howard Baskin. Between helping Carol sue Joe and being generally a strange dude, Howard is not as hateable as Carol, but he's pretty close.
We could sue him for violating our copyright.
He assists in Carol's plans, which include suing Joe's parents, soliciting unpaid labor, and profiting off keeping tigers in captivity. But he isn't the mastermind behind these plans, so he's more of a side character in the poor decision-making. Onwards and downwards to Tim Stark, former associate of Jeff Lowe and weirdo on tenure.
Keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer.
While he isn't hanging monkeys and diapers from his neck, he's breaking federal law. Former proprietor of Wildlife in Need, his license was revoked by the USDA, and his sanctuary, quote-unquote, was charged $300,000 in fines. In 2016, PETA leveled 120 charges against him for animal abuse. One of the claims stated that he beat a leopard to death with a baseball bat. Ugh. Okay, on to Jeff Lowe.
They call it setup, I call it investigate.
A playboy and a swinger who puts tigers into suitcases and brings them to hotel rooms.
He rolled them through the casino, up into the suites.
He was arrested for driving a bus down the Vegas Strip, offering high-paying customers the opportunity to ride with big cat cubs. The man is a con man and a felon, and after stepping as the benefactor to help Joe Exotic revive his sanctuary, he shifted ownership over to himself.
Move, then do it, and I'll run this park the right way.
By the end of the series, we see that Jeff is in the process of hiring a nanny for his baby, stating, if you're gonna bring in one, why not bring in one who's not enjoyable to look at?
Why bring in one that's not enjoyable to look at?
Really, another absolutely bizarre individual who somehow miraculously cons people. Seriously, the craziest thing about this series is how so many of these seemingly dim-witted people are able to pull off cons over and over.
Seems like everybody starts out well with me and then it ends bad.
We are in the final three, folks, which means we've hit peak awfulness. For Bronze and Evil, we have Doc Antle, the spiritual polygamist that may or may not have euthanized baby tigers in a gas chamber and cremate their bodies in an on-site incinerator.
He cremates their bodies in his on-site crematorium.
Allegedly, we must add, but if that is the case, this guy has stepped into some truly dark territory. In addition to this, one of his former employees turned lovers has accused him of psychological manipulation, encouraging his employees to be intimate with him so that they would be bonded to him in a way in which he felt like he could get them to do anything.
His touch brings them up to his level of enlightenment.
If there was a word that best described his employment methods, it would be cult-ish.
He's got his little cult and I got my little cult.
Requirements for employment include being female, childless, and single, and no time off is given. All for the promise of cute tiger cubs. Best not drink the Kool-Aid. Drum roll, please. In second place for the most evil person on Tiger King, it's none other than that bitch down in Florida, Carol Baskin. Throughout the show, she has a judgment for Joe Exotic that while she claims is fueled by a love and passion for her animals, is obviously run on her rage.
What they are doing is breeding cats for life in cages.
She claims to be opposed to Joe because of his profiteering of animals in captivity, yet she kinda does the same thing.
If you would use the hashtag Big Cat Rescue.
While she doesn't sell like Joe does, she does keep them in cages. No matter how spacious a cage is, it is still a cage. It's also trashy that she doesn't pay her employees, showing little regard for their well-being, and going so far as to admit she doesn't even talk to many of them.
Sadly, I hardly ever know who they are.
She tends to go on the defensive when it comes to talking about what happened to her husband, and the criticism online is rising to a breaking point. The theories that she killed her husband are not unbased. Many people in the documentary don't deny this claim, and even more, endorse it.
We believe that she fed him to the tigers.
And although it's only speculation, if 12 of your average internet users were on a jury, well, I think Carol Baskin would be doing hard time.
I promise you he's underneath that damn thing.
Are we gonna say she did it? Well, that's not our place. But her 1,000-yard stare and creepy smile don't make it better.
How would I have then put him in the septic tank?
If this woman was a condiment, it would be paint thinner.
Because you're afraid of Carol Baskin.
Oh, yes, I am.
And then there was one. First off, let us get it out of the way. Hashtag free Joe Exotic. It's funny, it's a funny meme, but this man, Joe Exotic, He's a monster. Whether he's shooting dummies of Carol and effigy, committing insurance fraud by burning down his own animal facilities, feeding his cats and customers rotten meat from Walmart dumpsters, or seducing young straight men with the promise of methamphetamine, this man is off the walls.
I had my days of drinking. I had my days of meth.
He's a lunatic. He casually sets his own possessions on fire to make a point. He hired not one, but two people to kill his rival. He stole his partner's money to illegally funnel it into his campaign for governor, commands his employees to kill the tigers they love and care about.
Did you shoot those tigers?
I euthanized 5 tigers.
Joe Exotic is a character. He's hilariously charismatic, and he's easily the most likable one in the documentary. But he's an unchained dog of a man who does everything to serve his own interest.
Because the disrespect around this place is ending today.
Even if Jeff Lowe did set him up, as he claims, he deserves what he's gotten for his other crimes. Sorry, not sorry.
They record everything. Because that's how they blackmail you.
So what do you think? Is Joe Exotic really innocent? Do you agree with our ranking? Or are we completely off? Look, if we got this one wrong, frankly, we will never financially recover from this. Remember to subscribe and hit that notification button, and binge our Good to Evil playlist, where we break down the morality spectrum of your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.